Hey there, it is March 31st, right at the end of the month. Awesome stuff. Yeah, updates for this week. So this week was awesome for getting for getting some coding, and I'm actually really excited about that. It was to the point where like I've been trying to be really on top of like some micro habits this year. I'm not really good at this kind of stuff, but I've been a lot more consistent with like just little things, trying to not get overwhelmed. Like to the point, if I was overwhelmed before, like I would stop taking vitamins because the mental tax of having to like put out vitamins and take them was too much. It seems ridiculous, but like little things like that would drop off, and I was really sick of getting to this point where kind of being stressed by stuff would cause that kind of reaction. So been doing really good this year, and when it comes to coding, like when I was getting in such a groove this week that it was almost disrupting my other habits. So I made a call it like a habit. I'm trying to make sure that every day I code for at least an hour. Like that's my minimum goal. And there's going to be like there's of course situations that'll come up, and it's out of my control. I couldn't get to it. That's fine. I don't like beat myself up for it, but I try to make sure that like outside of the gym, being with my fiance, work, that I try to in that free time try to code for an hour. And this past week was nuts because I was coding and getting to the point where I was like, if I like I'm in the groove, if I don't stop, like I'm gonna be breaking my habits for not getting to bed like around midnight, that kind of thing. So it's like it was almost rough because I was trying not to break that groove. But let me try to give a brief update on kind of what I was coding and what was going on, because some I think kind of interesting things. So on this is all for Meal Coach, by the way. So on the Meal Coach front, we had a sync up between the three of us. Like I think I mentioned last week, we have the meeting coming up with the other team next week, so that will be cool. But we had our internal meeting and kind of said like we're almost at a point again where we want to start getting user feedback, which is cool. Um, when you're not getting user feedback, it's kind of tricky because we come from the space of like in startups, we don't want to waste time building the wrong stuff. We want that feedback. But when you don't have users to give you the feedback, it's like, do you just not code anything? That feels like really demoralizing, especially as someone that loves to write code. So we think we're at the point we had a couple little bugs to fix up and stuff. And the other engineer for the front end stuff got like I don't know, like 90% of them done in like like 10 minutes. So pretty awesome. But he had noticed that there was a bug that when you go to use one of our primary pieces of functionality to generate a meal plan, it was throwing an exception on the server side, and then he would go run it again and it was fine. And that's the scariest kind of problem. And I was looking at the call stack, and it was a combination of things. I was like, I don't want to see this. So asynchronous code. So we have some threading issues. In the stack, there was also caching, so some caching issues. And basically, some IAsync enumerable and caching combination was causing connections to basically be in a state for MySQL, we're not able to have multiple database readers open on the same connection. And I went, oh shit, like I don't think I've touched this. Like, why is this broken? How am I even gonna diagnose this? This is like my least favorite kind of problem. Um, After poking around at it for way too long, I realized I did in fact change it. I changed a loop to basically run in parallel because I was like, these are all independent tasks. And because they have database queries, there's absolutely no reason they should be blocking each other. But here's the other fun thing. So that was cool. That took a long time, but it was like, here's the problem. The other issue is that, and this is a learning for me. I should have known this earlier, but I did not. So in MySQL, we're using I guess the NuGet package that's directly from the makers of MySQL, and that package comes with connection pooling built into it. So um, for folks that aren't totally familiar with that, like opening a connection to a database is not free. And if you're running, it's recommended that you don't have long lasting connections. And what I was trying to do as an optimization was if I'm about to go through this like call stack and I know I'm going to be doing a bunch of queries, just open the connection once, close it at the end. And that's why I was running into this situation where if I split that code path part way to go run in parallel with the same connection, you get multiple readers. So they have connection pooling built in by default. I didn't know this. So I went, okay, like that sucks. I mean, it's good, but it sucks that sorry, a dog ran into all the dogs are coming in here now. Um, it sucks that I went out of my way to go write all this code to do it this way. But cool. They have a solution for it. I'm gonna go refactor like 100. It was over 100 files, which doesn't sound like too crazy, but it was literally like the entire server that was not just handling the web routes and the parsing of the requests. Like everything below that was was touched, so it was a lot. So I fixed it, and then we had connection pooling. But then we had two more fun problems. And I'm a total idiot, so I like sharing stuff like this because I've been programming for over 20 years, and there's still stuff that we make mistakes. I have tests and still make mistakes, you know. So we we don't have anyone using the software right now, so I pushed to production and like technically it's broken. But what I noticed was that I would go run the stuff in production and it would go do, I think it was showing like it would do 600 queries in like a fraction of a second because we have a bunch of queries we have to run. But it was basically running out, it was running out of connections to the database. And I was like, this is ridiculous. How, like, we didn't create some software that's so, fantastical that no one's ever done something like this for database queries. Like, why is this an issue? This is nuts. So I started researching about like how we can increase the pool size. I'm like, this doesn't feel right, but it might kind of like get us buy us some time. We found out we're using AWS right now and saw that AWS has it's kind of interesting. They have like a proxy server that you can run on your like private cloud. So if you have your database, we're using RDS, like a MySQL RDS instance. You can put a proxy within your private network in the cloud, and it actually like manages a connection pool for you that's even greater than what MySQL offers. It's totally neat. I didn't know it existed. So go implement that. And I hate this kind of stuff, like DevOps stuff and like cloud architecture. Like the concepts, really cool. Love to work with it. But when it comes to the actual implementation and navigating like AWS, I work at Microsoft. I personally haven't used Azure a lot. But when it comes to actually configuring that stuff, it drives me nuts. I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm wasting tons of time. So anyway, I get this thing set up. Cool. So now we have connection pooling. We have this pretty powerful like connection pooling proxy service in the cloud. I'm like, we gotta be good. But something's still bothering me because I'm like, I don't know why it's happening that we're using so many connections and running out. I'm like, these queries, some of them are so short and small. Like we cache the results and stuff, but um, I'm like, the only way that this could be happening is if we're running a lot of long running queries. And I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. So what I did is I wrote a pretty ugly little implementation that when we open, this is just for debug mode. When we open up a connection, I track the call stack to see where it was open. And then when we close it, I remove this entry that has the call stack information. That way, when it finally throws an exception on our server and says you can't open any more connections, I now have a list of all the call stacks that were opening connections and haven't closed them yet. It's like, this is genius. So once I had all this stuff in place, I said, fine, I'm going to debug it. I'm going to get to the root cause of this, but I've bought us some time. So I go to debug it. I put a breakpoint in the close and dispose methods of this connection, and I run our meal generation endpoint basically, and it's extremely heavy for database activity. So run it, and I don't hit the close or dispose method a single time. And I'm sitting at my desk going, that's impossible. It has to be impossible. Like something's broken. Like that doesn't make sense. So I go look at, remember I mentioned earlier I touched over 100 files. It's not just 100 spots, 100 files to go basically rewrite anything that was uh, doing data access. In every single one of those spots, I would open up a SQL connection and then open or start a command off of that connection. And what I failed to do in my refactor was dispose of the connections every time I open them. I disposed of the commands, not the connections. So I had to go back through all 100 plus files across every single instance that ever opened a connection and make sure that I disposed of the connection. Once I did that, everything was fine. So, some learnings. First of all, don't be stupid, Nick. That's number one. Number two is like I think I when I refactor stuff, I get in the habit of like kind of it's gonna sound kind of weird, but like looking at the shape of the code, right? Because if I have a pattern that's across a bunch of places, I'm like, as long as the shape represents what I'm interested in, like keep going. I have tests in place. All the tests were passing. A couple of times, some of the functional tests would fail, indicating some connection stuff, and I'm like, yeah, it just seems a little. Maybe it's I don't know. Like I can't explain why, but it was an indicator something was wrong. So I have the tests in place. That's good. But honestly, just being more careful. I rushed it for sure, artificially because, like I said, we don't have active users on the platform. So it kind of yeah, it felt embarrassing. Even though the only people that I'm like letting down by doing that are myself and the other two people working on this, but they don't care either. I know, but yeah, it just kind of felt embarrassing. So it was good. It was a good learning. I got to learn about the connection pooling in MySQL. I got to learn about the RDS proxy service, which is totally cool. Had no idea that existed. And then the other thing was really just about um, sort of the realization that this parallel pattern that I introduced, like that I need to be more careful about that kind of stuff. It wasn't just an optimization to say all this stuff is unrelated. Like functionally and conceptually it is, but it was sharing a resource and I missed that. So anyway, really cool. Made a ton of progress. Then that was sort of the bulk of it at the beginning of the week. Once that was all functioning, I think we fixed all of the bugs because, like I said, the other engineer tackled like all of them right away. The next thing that was a gap was in our unit conversion system. So I have a microservice. I say microservice, the whole thing's a monolith. It's probably called like a modular monolith. We have a service dedicated to converting units. And in particular, it has a endpoint to beautify the units so that we can show quantities in a way that a user would want to see. So for example, you never want to see for how many, grams of peanut butter you want to eat. You never want to see like 11.239.714 grams of peanut butter because you don't give a shit. It doesn't matter. Like saying 11 grams is fine, like whatever. Um, so we wanted some endpoints. That's a exaggerated example. We wanted some endpoints to kind of pretty these things up for users, and had done this before, but I ran into an issue, which is that um, when we're doing this for foods can have entries that are measured in mass and volume, and you can't actually convert between mass and volume without density, right? So you need some sort of factor that is the density to convert between these units. And the only thing in our system that has that knowledge about density, because we can't assume everything is just, one to one like water. You can't, because if I gave you a powder ingredient and said go do this, it would not work. Um, the only sort of identifier that gives us that extra information is on the food itself. So I had a couple of foods that have information about being measured in mass and measured in volume. And what was happening was when they touched that units microservice, it's trying to do a conversion between mass and volume, and it can't. It's like I can't convert those units. So it was a good learning. I remember making that endpoint and thinking, I think there's a gap here, and finally found it. So I basically made a very similar endpoint on our food microservice, um, and it just takes in the extra information about the food. That way, it can actually go look it up, find the density, do the conversion. So that was cool. And probably the only other thing I'll add on to that is that it enabled me to go look at another set of functional tests. I've been really on a functional test kick. I know people that know me well know I love to talk about unit tests, but for this kind of stuff, man, like just writing lightweight functional tests to get to it's I feel like I'm doing less work for more confidence, um, especially because stuff's changing so regularly. So wrote some functional tests on those endpoints, which is great because I get end-to-end coverage on some scenarios I care about, and I could prove that we have density covered there. I think that's I know that was like most of the time. I mean, the whole time I just talked about meal coach and programming. So that's really what I wanted to touch on today. The final thing I'll just say from like a content generation perspective, I got so lucky today that I watched a random YouTube video while I was eating that recommended a platform called Video or something, Vidyo. Um, and I think I've mentioned before in these check-ins that like making short form, bleh, making short form video content, there we go, is a huge pain in the ass for me because I'm either remixing stuff out of YouTube and making shorts out of it. It kind of feels like shit. Um, or I have to go record like this or record on my phone. I want to edit it, but it's like the ROI on it's like zero. I mean, it's like negative. I'm putting time into it, and what I don't get anything out of it. I just need to keep putting out content and making sure that the information in it's valuable. The production quality is not getting me anything right now. So anyway, this site, you can give it YouTube links, and then it does what I hate doing manually, which is it goes and chops up important pieces for you and makes short form content. Um, so that's going to be a crazy time saver. I'm excited about that. And then only other thing I'll add in is I had to go bump up my Zapier subscription. It feels like crappy. I was running out at the end of the month. I was running out of like my tasks to go automate things, so had to go pay a little bit more. Um, so right now, like from being active on social media and trying to be a software engineering influencer of some sort, I am definitely losing money on this every single month. I'm hopeful that in the future that can that can change. I hope that people find value in this kind of stuff and will support me. So if you're watching this, that means you are, and thank you so much. We'll wrap it up there. Yeah, feels good to have some momentum, and we'll catch you next week. See ya.